Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the professor, and this is the moment of truth.
You was gonna stand on it.
He said I stand.
And I'm gonna stand fast on it. You was big and bad, had your chest all out.
Because he said I have an army behind me.
Yes, what happened to you? Where'd it go?
Talk about ask and ye shall receive. Shannon Not So Sharpe asked, "Where was Kyrie Irving's army at?" And they showed him. Now, before we begin, I want to make sure that everybody's put on notice. Let's not do any spitball fighting about whether or not you agree with anyone's religion or not. This is about their actions, not about anyone's beliefs. The Hebrew Israelites saw that someone who was aligned with them was under attack, so they showed up to support him. And he has refused to denounce them. Nor should he, by the way. Kyrie Irving should not be denouncing the Hebrew Israelites at all. And just for the record, you can say what you want about the Hebrew Israelites, but you can't deny that this is something that black people need to do a hell of a lot more often. To me, this display was a teachable moment. The Hebrew Israelites clearly wanted to make a demonstration of their discipline and their organization, and they did. The white media was beyond shook. Now, you got the white media being led by the New York Times trying to say, well, there was only about 100 of these guys. It looks like it's a little bit more than 100 to me. But of course, that's par for the course, be it the Census Bureau or the U.S. Park Service with the Million Man March. They're always claiming that there's far, far less black people than there really are because they're terrified to admit the numbers. And when you had this many black men lay siege to the Barclays Center, the white media was terrified to cover that. They did this right in the heart of New York City. I want you to think about that. The white media sees white supremacists with tiki torches, and they're all over that. Even after Heather Heyer was murdered, they were still there. But seeing a small army of black men marching through New York City to support another black man who refused to bow, and they don't even want to touch this. In the media capital of the United States, no less, at the very arena where the most talked about athlete on the planet was making his return.
Father was there where you left. Right. Mother was there where you left. Right. Uncle was there where you left. Right. Auntie was there where you left. Right. Your cousin was there where you left. Right. Brother was there where you left. Right. Your sister was there where you left. Right. Your father, your mother, your uncle, your auntie, your cousin, your brother, your sister was there where you left. Right. That's the reason you left. Right.
You had the very hate group that the white media accused Kyrie Irving of promoting right outside. Well over 100 of them marching and chanting, and the white media didn't dare show it to the public. They didn't dare even approach them. These men were on code with one another. I don't care what you think about their beliefs. I'm asking you to realize that white power is afraid of what it saw them do. You see, unlike some so-called gun coalitions, where you have some well-meaning but otherwise misled black people following an ex-rapper who was clearly an agent, the white media was willing to give big coverage to that so-called gun coalition. Why, even Joe Scarborough and Mika the Bigot Brzezinski ran a story about them on their morning sideshow. Well, this event should have gotten 50 times that much coverage, certainly deserves it. Problem is, these guys aren't agents. You don't have to agree with someone's beliefs to give them credit for having their act together. The white media had no problem having the Hebrew Israelites on TV for interviews last year, but all of a sudden the white media doesn't want them on, because the subject now is them directly confronting white power in its very home. Last time, the white media's game was to try to make them look ridiculous, but it's a little difficult to make this look ridiculous. This scares white people. It certainly petrified the white media. And this illustrates what I've always taught you about how to know when you got the bastards shook. When the white media or white power in general is beaten, don't look for them to give a formal declaration of surrender. Black people have to stop waiting for that. White power is never going to come up with the confession. You'll know when they're beaten by the sound of their silence. When they're all out of moves and they know you've got them cold, they'll shut up. They didn't count on Kyrie's supporters showing up or on them showing up in numbers. They didn't think this would happen. So now we see the white media trying to go into damage control mode. They're trying to put the right spin on all this. And of course, the New York Times decides to lead the charge on this one. The same New York Times who did not dare show up at Barclays Center to actually talk to the Hebrew Israelites, certainly not even to take photographs of them. Even on their own website story about this, they didn't dare have any photos. This event happened in New York City, the Times home base, not far from their building, but apparently they didn't have a way to get any reporters there or photographers, even though the Hebrew Israelites have been out there for 2 nights straight. Instead, the Times simply called the Hebrew Israelites a fringe group. Then they used what is clearly the go-to talking point that Israel United in Christ is considered a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. This, apparently, is what qualifies as all the news that's fit to print. Southern Poverty Law Center indeed. Both the New York Times and the Southern Poverty Law Center were founded by white power. The New York Times and the SPLC are both founded by, staffed by, and work in the interest of the white establishment. This is how white power works. They try to create their own closed loop of disinformation. You have a white media outlet, the New York Times, writing a hit piece against a black man, and they also have another white disinformation organ, the SPLC, who they quote from. One operative of white power is using another operative of white power as an authoritative source. White power is quoting itself and trying to present this to you as if this gives the story legitimacy. And I've seen that quote all over, by the way. Southern Poverty Law Center says that the IUIC is a hate group. Seems everyone who has something critical to say about the Hebrew Israelites uses that same statement. The Southern Poverty Law Center says that they're a hate group. See, this is how you know it's AstroTurf. People who just bomb into the comments section for seemingly no other purpose other than to drop their talking point and then leave. It reminds me of the white supremacists who cut and paste their phony crime stats in the comment sections all the time. Be they on the right or the left, they all operate out of the same playbook, especially where black people are concerned. Now, let's talk about the demands that the Chinese-American owner of the Nets franchise has made of Kyrie Irving, because this was where the white powers that be and their white-adjacent operatives overplayed their hand. The Nets franchise owner Joe Tsai made at least a half-dozen demands that he wanted Kyrie Irving to do before he could play again. Now, why were all these asinine conditions being put on Kyrie? Because Kanye West made it obvious that this kind of strong-arming wouldn't work with him. They can't suspend Kanye West from releasing albums or doing shows. They don't have the ability to coerce Kanye into doing anything. So they're borrowing a page from the right-wing fascist playbook. By that I mean the white right has been taking a political beating for the last few years. Black protesters have not only damaged the enforcement arm of white supremacy, but in 2020 they took the fight directly into the racist very cities. They imposed a price for practicing anti-black racism. So we've seen people like DeSantis and others doing what amounts to a Twitter comment section rant masquerading as legislation. They don't have enough support to get anything done societally, because that's what the black protesters have been doing for the last few years. They managed to get the police punished now consistently, and they didn't have to get a single law passed in order to do it. So we see the white right, who are using the only real bastion that they have left, the legislature, to make what amounts to political statements, because that's all they've got. And who have the statements been against? Mostly schools, arenas where they think they can call the shots. As I've documented for you on this channel, DeSantis' so-called laws have been struck down by the courts, but the reason that he and his pals did it in the first place was because they were getting handed L after L everywhere else. They have no other way to try to call themselves fighting back, quote-unquote, and they didn't have any ability to do anything about the people in the streets who are handing them these L's. They're trying to control the controllables, if you will. Now, what's happening to Kyrie Irving is the same thing. They need to have a black man that they can hold up to the public and show that they've punished him harshly and that he's begging for mercy. Except Kyrie isn't. And the harder they push, the more support he gets. But make no mistake, this is all meant as a way to punish Kanye West by proxy. They're demanding that Kyrie Irving jump through all these hoops, things that these people have never and would never demand from the thugs in blue after they kill a black person. They make these so-called conditions ridiculous on their face because that's the entire point. It's egregious, it's blatantly insulting, and that's the entire reason that they're demanding it. This is about humiliating a black man as thoroughly as possible. Make him jump through hoops for their sick amusement. And the fact that so many of the NBA players have not said anything about this, that the precedent's being set that if you're a black man in sports, well, we're going to make you just grovel. We're going to do everything that we can to humiliate you. They certainly won't be making demands like this of all of those racists, be they in NASCAR or in the NFL or baseball, basketball, or anywhere else. We're just going to reserve this for black men. And because of the fact that they're not saying anything and they're certainly not making it clear, we're not going to let this precedent be set. Well, the $40 million slaves are living up to their nickname. The list of demands was so stupid that even Shannon Sharpe wasn't able to defend it.
Because they've given this decree now, Skip. It wasn't enough that he apologized. Now they're trying to I believe they're trying to rob the man of his dignity. They're trying to make him grovel to come and get his job back. And I don't agree with that. A man said he was sorry. Hey, I was wrong. Yeah, I would have liked to see him. Hey, I shared a link to my page. It was brought to my attention that I offended a group of people. And for that, I would like to say I'm sincerely sorry. That was not my intention.
First, they want him to say that he's sorry. Well, he already did twice, but apparently twice wasn't good enough. Wasn't good enough for whom, I should ask. Joe Tsai also says that he wants Kyrie Irving to condemn the movie. So he's supposed to be a movie critic now? There was also the demand that Kyrie Irving is supposed to pay $500,000 to this or that Jewish organization. That's weird as hell on its face. NBA players are supposed to pay fines to the league, aren't they? Since when did the ADL or whomever become the disciplinary committee for the NBA? Since when are they the ones who collect NBA fines? And apparently they don't know or don't care how that move in particular plays to a certain anti-Semitic trope. They're actually reinforcing that trope with that particular demand. Kyrie Irving doesn't owe anyone one thin dime. He didn't take any money from anyone, and he doesn't owe them anything. If someone wants $500,000, they can do the same thing that Kyrie Irving has done. Work for it. Next, they want him to go to sensitivity training. Then they want him to educate himself on anti-Semitism. Wait a minute. Wasn't that already covered by the sensitivity training part? I hope this education, however, will include how the Israeli government and a large part of its citizens are oppressing and harming black Jews in Israel, because that's certainly anti-Semitic. Perhaps Jonathan Greenblatt will bother to educate himself on that bit of anti-Semitism. They want Kyrie to meet with the ADL and Jewish leaders. Now, doesn't that eliminate the need for him to educate himself on anti-Semitism? If he's going to meet with Jewish leaders and an organization who allegedly is all about fighting anti-Semitism, unless it's white Jews harming black Jews, that is, then I would think they would bring the subject up during their meeting. Isn't the best education person to person? But it's the last demand that shows that anti-black racism is indeed a group sport. And some of the worst anti-black racists out there are not white at all. Joe Tsai also demands that Kyrie Irving meet with him and demonstrate his understanding of the issues. Demonstrate his understandings? What the hell's that supposed to mean? Is he supposed to act like some scolded school child and write 100 times on the board, "I will not disobey Massa, I will not disobey Massa"? Is that what it's supposed to be? This is about getting Irving to debase himself and grovel, not because it does anything productive, but because they can't get Kanye West to do it. This is proxy warfare. This list is stupid on its face. What next? Are they going to demand that Kyrie Irving stand on his head, recite the Pledge of Allegiance backwards while knitting a sweater? This is exactly what it looks like they're trying to punk Kyrie Irving for no reason. It's obvious to everyone that Kyrie did absolutely nothing wrong, and that this is phony outrage that's actually supposed to be serving another agenda altogether. It's also obvious that this is going way overboard, even if you did believe that having an Amazon.com account is anti-Semitic. This reminds me of what happened right after the O.J. criminal trial was ended and he was acquitted. These prosecutors started going after any rapper they could, and they kept on going after Michael Jackson. They were determined that they were going to get a high-profile black man in prison because they desperately needed to reassure themselves that black people are the designated whipping boy. And every time that a Snoop Dogg or a Puff Daddy was exonerated, they just got more and more furious. So no, this phony outrage about Kyrie Irving has absolutely nothing to do with Kyrie Irving or anti-Semitism. It's about selecting a high-profile black man who has done nothing wrong, then call him a ton of false names, demonize him to the nth degree so you can put him on the defensive, then say that you'll destroy his career unless he grovels before you. And he's got to do so in a way that's just shockingly humiliating. That's because when someone as famous as Kanye West refuses to bend the knee, even after he loses all these big business deals, that's a problem. You don't want defiance to become a matter of principle. Instead, what they want to see is a black person is accused of something, you demand that they grovel, and if they refuse to grovel, then you just go ahead and inflict some economic punishment on them, and then they're going to finally bow down. That's the script, or at least that's the way it's supposed to go. And this public humiliation of Kyrie Irving is supposed to erase the memory of Kanye West's defiance. But by them going over the top like this, their plan has backfired big time, because in their rush to prove that their failure to make Kanye West sorry was a fluke, they've now shown that this isn't about anti-Semitism at all. Everyone can see that this isn't about Kyrie Irving. This is about something else. And now LeBron James is saying this is excessive. And Jaylen Brown, who's part of the Players Union leadership, is calling this out and calling out the hypocrisy of Joe Tsai personally.
You responded to Joe Tsai's comment about Kyrie on Twitter. What about that bothered you? And what about Joe Tsai's comment? And then what, if anything, that the league has done has bothered you?
Yeah, his response was alarming to me. I tweeted it out yesterday. He didn't say that the organization was working together to get Kyrie back on the floor. He said that he had more work to do. And our society has more work to do, including Joe Tsai. And it's 2022. It takes 10 minutes of time to see who, these business owners, corporations, et cetera, who they're associated with, who they're doing business with, and who they're affiliated with. And I'm vice president of the union. And it's part of my job to protect our players legally. And to see Phil Knight first come out and condemn, Kyrie, and also see Joe Tsai say he has more work to do, I think it's time for a larger conversation.
Now, for those of you who don't know, Joe Tsai happens to be the founder and vice chairman of Alibaba. And Alibaba is a tech firm in China that has been neck deep in the oppression and cultural genocide of the Uyghurs. Anytime you see the Chinese government moving against the Uyghurs, you also see Alibaba is right in there with them. Nobody has ever taken Joe Tsai to task for any of this. This is what Jaylen Brown is getting at, and what the white media isn't. This is the guy who's going to call himself standing in judgment of Kyrie Irving and demanding that Kyrie Irving take sensitivity training and that he educate himself on anti-Semitism, and he also needs to come to Joe Tsai and give an accounting of himself. If anyone needs sensitivity training, it's Joe Tsai, because he's been helping the Chinese government to stomp the Uyghur people out of existence. Jaylen Brown is absolutely right to call out Tsai and his support of the communist regime and the oppression they carry out in that country, because the white media doesn't want to have that conversation. As black men, we're not supposed to exercise any power over non-black people. Everyone else is supposed to be able to attack us, attack our livelihoods, kill us in the streets if they want to. But the second a black man merely pulls someone's coat, all these anti-black racists go on full alert. But Jaylen Brown made the right move pointing the finger at Joe Tsai. As they say in sports, team reflects leadership. Instead of just talking about Kyrie Irving, the conversation needs to be about the Nets organization in general, and that conversation needs to start with Joe Tsai. Kyrie Irving has done nothing wrong. He hasn't harmed anyone, didn't even harm anyone's feelings. Joe Tsai, on the other hand, has openly supported oppressive regimes who have mass incarcerated entire groups of people and committed countless killings in the name of control. But nobody in the white media or the ADL had a problem with that. Oh yeah, when they were complaining about LeBron James not speaking out against China's crackdown in Hong Kong, you notice how nobody was making it a point to confront Joe Tsai for his open support for the Chinese regime. The white media didn't go to Joe Tsai and say, you've got to denounce the Chinese regime. You've got to denounce them. You can't stand with these guys. You have to speak out against them. They didn't do that with him. They did that with LeBron James, though. Now, Joe Tsai is running his mouth saying that Kyrie Irving isn't fit to be part of the Nets organization, but the real question is Joe Tsai fit to be part of the NBA? See, that's a conversation they don't want to have. Of course, nobody's asking what punishment Amazon.com should bear. Nobody's saying that Amazon should pay the ADL one thin dime or pay anyone else any money for that matter. No one's saying what Amazon should do, what hoops they should jump through. They're the ones who are selling the video. So you have this multinational company, the world's largest online retailer, and they're selling, allegedly, anti-Semitic videos. But instead of actually going after the people who are selling the videos and distributing them and making sure that everybody gets a copy, instead, they're going up to one guy in particular and saying, you saw that video, didn't you? We're going to deal with you. Doesn't that sound just a little bit strange? No, this isn't about anti-Semitism at all. This is about some people who are angry that they can't get Kanye West to bow down, so they're going after someone else instead. But of course, as they always do, they went too far. These anti-black racists never know when to quit. And speaking of somebody who needs to quit, Skip Bayless showed his true colors.
But I had to wonder, was Kyrie standing up, backing up Kanye? Was there something operating under the surface here? I don't know, but I just throw it out. I don't know. And obviously, his owner condemned him.
Did he say his owner?
Obviously, his owner condemned him.
You hear that? He called Joe Tsai Kyrie Irving's owner, and that wasn't some slip of the tongue. That was him saying what he really thinks. This is something I want you to remember. I've told you for the longest time that when these white liberals who pretend to be so open-minded and understanding, when they see a black person who decides to push back, they start talking like any Fox News viewer you ever heard. The moment that a black man doesn't immediately lie down and say, walk all over me. Oh, and on a side note, Jason Whitlock, I think he was the stunt double for Gabby Sidibe in Precious. Well, it seems he's trying to talk a little, very, very little pro-black now. It sounds so strange and so wrong coming from his forked tongue. Yeah, he sees that the white right aren't offering him anything, so he's trying to pivot. But of course, when you're the size of a compact SUV, pivoting is a little difficult. And when you have no integrity, it's impossible. Though for the record, when I heard him refer to Stephen Smith and Shannon Sharpe as a minstrel show, my eyes rolled up so far into my head they almost didn't come back down again. Yeah, when Massa stops throwing them crumbs, these bootlegs always try to reinvent themselves. Anything to keep the grift going a little bit longer. And speaking of deadbeats who are still trying to figure out how they can hustle themselves some more money or influence, the white media is desperately trying to maintain the narrative that black men are inspiring anti-Semitic violence. Well, there is anti-Semitic violence happening, or at least plots to do so, but it's not black men who are doing it. The anti-Semitic attacks are coming from the same place they've always come from. Gee, did anyone check to see if this guy is a fan of Kanye West? Does he have a Kyrie Irving jersey at home? Does he have an Amazon account? Is he perhaps a secret member of the Black Hebrew Israelites? Because not to put too fine a point on it, but I sure couldn't tell by looking. Now, if you want to talk about anti-Semitic violence, here it is. As I told you in last Sunday's address, which, by the way, you should watch if you haven't already, look at who's attacking these synagogues and these Jewish community centers. It's not black people. And by the way, for any trolls or idiots in the comment section who try to defend this public lynching of Kyrie Irving, don't try it. The white media wanted a black man they could accuse of being an anti-Semite, whether he was or not. Someone who they could destroy because they failed with Kanye West. If it wasn't Kyrie, they would have gone after Keith Ellison, or any black politician or music figure or athlete who happens to be Muslim, or what have you. Find some black man who they will claim is associated with anti-Semites somehow. This is the same thing they did with Keith Ellison, by the way. Same playbook they ran against Kyrie Irving. Well, we can't say that you said or did anything anti-Semitic, but you're guilty by association. And because of that, you're an anti-Semite and you better bow down. You better disavow them. You better say these guys are evil. If it wasn't Kyrie, it would have been someone else. Well, now they're 0 for 3 with this smear campaign. Kyrie Irving's army showed up, and their former detractors like Shannon Sharpe have been forced to change their tune. The white media went from ridiculing the Hebrew Israelites to now running scared from them. Kyrie's support is growing, both from outside the league and from within it, but make no mistake, it's because Kyrie has the support of the people that his colleagues have felt it just safe enough for them to make a few murmurs of support, or at the very least, to give some passing criticism to the league's persecution of him. Well, this little episode is proving that the old sports adage is still true. Adversity doesn't build character, it reveals it. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Sandra Bates, Clifton Johnston, Stay Positive, Stephen Mugisa, and Cackle into Goku. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.